Emily entered the room as Sophia was wiping the blood from the corner of her mouth. Emily approached with a smug smile, exuding confidence.
You've really had a tough time taking this punishment for me.
You're just my stand-in. James pretended to cherish you all these years just to make you a target for our enemies.
Sophia had long known she was Emily's substitute. She once saw a painting in James's study of a young girl, around 10 years old, holding a peach blossom with a radiant smile. That bright smile was something she could never replicate. They only shared a resemblance in appearance.
I wanted to ask who she was, but I had no right to, as I wasn't even considered his concubine.
James angrily snatched the painting from her hands, carefully rolled it up, and put it away, warning her never to enter his study again. That night, he was unusually passionate, and it was a night of wild abandon. Afterwards, he gently kissed her and said, "Be good from now on."
Be good from now on.
I agreed.
Later, Sophia found out that it was the day Emily got engaged to the crown prince, which explained his loss of control. Even if she was just a stand-in, she was the only woman by his side for all these years, and everyone knew he favored and loved her.
When the crown prince captured me, I hoped he would come to save me, but I was more worried that he would fall into a trap.
Instead, what awaited her was a barrage of arrows. Some pierced her chest, and her captor harmed her. Everyone thought she was his weakness, that capturing her would control him. But in reality, she was just a pawn to mislead the enemy, a stand-in for Emily. Emily grabbed Sophia's chin and forced a pill into her mouth.
Your mission is complete. Even if you die now, James won't care about you.
Why did she need to compete with me for his affection? James's feelings for her were obvious.
James invited Sophia to a flower viewing party, but his gaze passed over her and landed on Emily, deep and complex. The next moment, he smiled and placed a jade hairpin in Sophia's hair, wrapped his arm around her waist, and kissed her forehead. He knew that without her to divert attention, his feelings for Emily would be too obvious. She was just a scapegoat.
But I was resilient and refused to die easily. I used all my strength to push Emily away.
James entered just in time to see Emily fall to the ground. He rushed to her side, tore off a piece of his clothing to bandage her wound. After comforting her, he narrowed his eyes at Sophia.
Sophia, know your place. Emily is my wife. Apologize to her.
He didn't care who started it. Who would have thought that the famous Emily, known throughout the capital, would scheme against her? But James, the calm and sharp James, wasn't someone easily fooled by such tricks.
She said she wanted to poison me.
Emily clung to his arm, shaking her head and choking on her words.
I didn't poison her. I just came to give my sister some medicine. Seeing her maid wasn't around, I thought I'd help her take it. I didn't expect. Sister must have been too agitated to push me. I'm not hurt.
James gently stroked her hair, his eyes full of pain and tenderness. But towards Sophia, there was only endless coldness.
I'll overlook this because you're injured. If you don't behave, I'll send you back to the Red Pavilion.
The Red Pavilion, the largest brothel in the capital. Hearing that name, blood surged up Sophia's throat. After following him for 5 years, he knew exactly what she feared most. And she knew he wasn't joking.
Victoria, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pushed you or accused you.
As soon as she finished speaking, her throat tightened, and she spat out a mouthful of blood, splattering James's face. She smiled apologetically at him.
James once said I didn't smile enough, wasting my beauty.
So, whether sad or happy, she always smiled when she saw him. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was his panicked eyes as he pushed Emily aside and rushed towards her, calling out Sophia with a trembling voice.
Sophia!
Victoria sighed deeply. The tension in the room was palpable as James fixed a stern gaze on Sophia.
I'll overlook this because you're injured. If you don't behave, I'll send you back to the Red Pavilion.
The Red Pavilion, the largest brothel in the capital. Hearing that name, blood surged up Sophia's throat. After 5 years with James, he knew exactly what she feared most. And she knew he wasn't joking.
James, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pushed you or accused you.
She shouldn't have had any expectations of him. As soon as she finished speaking, her throat tightened, and she spat out a mouthful of blood, splattering James's face. She smiled apologetically at him.
I shouldn't have expected anything different.
James once said she didn't smile enough, wasting her beauty. So, whether sad or happy, she always smiled when she saw him. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was his panicked eyes as he pushed Emily aside and rushed towards her, calling out Sophia with a trembling voice.
Sophia lived in the most secluded courtyard of the mansion, yet the servants' conversations always reached her ears.
James carved a pair of jade pendants for them.
Emily replaced the peony garden with orchids, and James escorted Emily to the palace banquet in grand attire. They were childhood sweethearts.
Reason told Sophia that James eliminated the crown prince to support a more suitable heir. But thinking about the painting in his study, she felt he had personal motives. During her recovery, Sophia started playing the zither again. Just like when she was at the drunken Red Pavilion, placing her hands on the instrument always calmed her. Without it, she wouldn't have survived those 7 years of torment. Lost in thought, she realized James, whom she hadn't seen for a month, was sitting beside her, resting his head on his hand. The sunlight highlighted his eyes, making them sparkle, and his lips curled into a slight smile, as if he were looking at something precious.
I didn't know you were coming, my lord. Forgive me for not welcoming you properly.
There's no need for that between us. How is your wound?
His sudden concern made Sophia uncomfortable. She withdrew her hand from his and leaned to one side. Noticing his slight frown, she discreetly moved back. This was her ingrained ability to read people.
It's been a while since we went out together. Tomorrow, I'll take you to the theater.
Don't you need to accompany Victoria? She glanced behind him, where Emily stood a few yards away.
Emily's face darkened, seemingly taking Sophia's words as a challenge. She lifted her skirt and ran over, clutching James's sleeve and complaining.
James, why are you here? I've been looking for you.
Then she noticed the 7-string zither in front of Sophia, green jade.
What a beautiful zither! She plucked the strings and turned to James. Give it to me. I'll play it for you.
She probably thought James had given it to Sophia, as she couldn't afford such a fine instrument. But James knew it was her mother's keepsake, the only thing in the mansion that truly belonged to Sophia.
Please, James.
Sophia, I'll find you a better zither later.
Sophia didn't need that. She just wanted her own things. She grabbed Emily's hand and removed it from her zither. Emily retaliated by pulling her clothes. In the struggle, the strings snapped and a cut appeared on Sophia's face. Her vision blurred, and she used all her strength to push Emily into the water. Her wound reopened. Originally, it would have healed in another month, but now it would take longer. Emily only caught a cold because James immediately jumped in to save her. He demanded Sophia apologize to Emily.
Give green jade to Emily. I'll personally make you a better zither. She saved my life. I can't let her down.
Why did he think he was more important to her than her mother? The doctor said Sophia needed to stay calm and avoid anger to survive. To save her life, she had to avoid arguing with him.
I think Victoria would be happier with a zither you made yourself.
She had never refused him like this before. He was stunned.
Emily only wants a zither. I've given you so many treasures. Isn't that worth one zither?
A wave of inexplicable grievance surged in her heart. She thought being his pawn, risking her life for Emily, was enough. But he wanted to trample on her dignity too. Of course, her lowly life couldn't compare to the daughter of the minister, Emily.
I thought being her substitute and taking her place in danger would settle our debts. Green jade can be hers, but can you promise me one thing? Let me go to the theater alone in the future.
He agreed. She placed green jade in his arms, plucking the strings one last time before letting go. James opened his mouth to say something, but she pushed him out of the room with all her strength. She closed the door and collapsed to the ground, taking deep breaths. Before her mother passed away, she told Sophia to live well, no matter what. As long as she could go out alone, she could find a way to escape the mansion.
I'm sorry, Mother. I had to trade green jade for my freedom.
Emily's illness was recurrent, and James stayed by her side day and night. My injuries had mostly healed, allowing me to come and go freely from the Duke's mansion, using the side gate to avoid attention. The fresh air, the lively calls of street vendors, and the hot buns fresh out of the oven made life outside the mansion vibrant and colorful.
Daisy, where do you want to go after we leave the mansion? I don't know. I'll go wherever you go, sister.
Then let's go to Suzhou. It's a wonderful place.
The director had arranged a new play, and although the audience was sparse, I enjoyed it. The story was about a famous courtesan in the capital who redeemed herself, only to be betrayed by the man she trusted, leading her to end her life in despair.
But if it were me, I would find a way to survive.
A nearby patron chuckled softly, and I realized he had overheard my conversation with Daisy. He was dressed in white, with a handsome face and eyes that seemed to be probing into my soul.
Luna?
Luna was my name before I was sold to the drunken Red House, where I was renamed Sophia. This meant he was an old acquaintance from Suzhou.
Is that you, Michael?
Michael was a renowned prodigy from Suzhou, who had the support of scholars at a young age. I was a poor student, but my father funded his education, which was how we became acquainted. I once dragged him to the theater, only to be scolded by my father for distracting him from his studies. But Michael promised to secretly take me to the theater in the future. I never expected to see him again. How many years had it been since I left home? 11 years. Sometimes, when I woke up in the middle of the night, I wondered if my life in Suzhou had been just a beautiful dream.
It's so good to see you're all right. I've been looking for you for so long.
I noticed tears welling up in his eyes, and I couldn't help but cry too. Years of grievances poured out like a flood, uncontrollable. I didn't cry when my family was destroyed, when I was sold to a brothel, when I lived cautiously by James's side, or when I hovered on the brink of death. Tears of pain or grievance were quickly wiped away, as I pretended to be strong to survive. But now, I couldn't hold back, crying my heart out. Once, I was also someone who lived a life of luxury, cherished by my parents, brothers, and friends. After the outburst, I realized I had buried my face in his chest. I quickly stepped back and started talking about our memories of Suzhou. Michael and I talked from day to dusk. He was in the capital preparing for next year's imperial examination, a true pride of Suzhou. He said he often visited the theater, even though he never liked plays before. It was always me who pestered him to go.
Then you must do your best and become the top scholar. That way, I'll be the hometown friend of the top scholar.
His eyes darkened for a moment at my words. I knew his feelings, but I couldn't acknowledge them. I had important things to do. We were no longer the same as we were in our childhood. He was a smart man. We parted ways at the theater entrance, he heading east to the inn, and I heading west to the Duke's mansion, unsure if we would meet again. As soon as I entered the mansion, James stood before me in black, his face expressionless, but his eyes burning with anger. That expression was just like when he appeared in the alley back then, saving me from those thugs.
Watching the show so late?
I ran into an old acquaintance and chatted for a bit.
Anything else to say?
I shook my head.
Knowing that Emily is expecting, you still pushed her and caused her to lose the baby. I didn't expect you to be so malicious.
Lose the baby? It wasn't me.
The smell of alcohol on him invaded my pores, and I instinctively turned my head away. It was still Emily who could make him, who usually didn't drink, reek of alcohol. She would feign illness every few days, but this time she went so far as to harm her own child. Didn't she love James? Why would she do this? He gripped my chin, forcing me to look into his eyes.
Just because I gave your zither to Emily, you hate me this much?
I told you it wasn't me.
He would never believe me.
She only saw you yesterday. She invited you to dinner to apologize, and you cruelly pushed her. Indeed, a woman from a brothel behaves so despicably.
You climbed into my bed back then, and now that I've married Emily, you want to harm us and meet with others in secret.
He pushed me to the ground, and the stones cut my palms. Indeed, in his heart, I was just a woman who would do anything to escape the brothel. I was blind to ever fantasize about being with him for a lifetime, even without a title. But in his heart, there was never a place for me.
I told you Emily is my family. If you bully her again, I won't let you off.
Someone, take her to the countryside estate and lock her up. Without my permission, she is not allowed to come and go. In an isolated villa in the countryside, I had been here for 3 months. Besides Daisy and me, there were only the servants and guards who were forbidden to speak to us. The only other being we could communicate with was a little stray cat. It was supposed to be driven away, but I had to dance all night to get James to agree to let it stay. Yes, in recent days, he would occasionally stay overnight. His eyes were full of complexity and regret when he looked at me. When I served him food, I heard him say, "I will take you back."
I will take you back.
In the quiet environment, his words were especially clear, but I pretended not to hear. He grabbed the hand I was using to serve food, making me face him.
I misunderstood you about Emily.
As long as Victoria is fine.
I didn't know how he found out, but it had nothing to do with me. Hearing my response, his brows furrowed, and his voice became urgent.
Don't you want to blame me?
Sophia doesn't blame you, my lord. You don't need to feel guilty. You redeemed me from the Red House, which is already a blessing from my past life.
Indeed, if it weren't for him, I wouldn't even know whose bed I would be in, or perhaps I would have been beaten to death by Aunt Rose. From the beginning, he treated me as a pawn. It was my own foolishness before, he just didn't love me. How could he be at fault? Even in the villa, he gave me countless jewels, medicines, and silks, never being harsh with me in terms of living conditions. Among the jewelry he gave me was a plum blossom ring, which was Jenny's mother's relic, never to be taken off unless she was no longer alive. Daisy secretly found out that Jenny was the Crown Prince's person. This meant that James knew from the beginning that I had connections with the Crown Prince, so even if he suspected me, he treated me very well. I don't hate him. But I won't love him anymore. I can't afford his love. James left behind a zither, one he made himself. I accepted it with a smile but never touched it. He said he would take me back to the manor next spring. I said okay. On New Year's Eve, while every household was lit up, the fire in the countryside villa seemed insignificant. Daisy and I, along with the little cat, ran away while everyone was busy putting out the fire.
Autumn passed, and spring came. 3 years had gone by. In Suzhou, a new musician named Luna appeared on the stage. I changed my name and played the zither here. When I first arrived in Suzhou, I wandered around with Daisy and unknowingly walked into a theater. The old director, who was rehearsing, recognized me.
Alive, that's good.
That was the first time I saw this stern old man show a gentle side. My father and the director were old friends, and I used to come here often as a child, saying I would perform here someday. I didn't have the talent for acting, but I could play the zither. And so, I stayed for 3 years. The little cat had kittens, Daisy was about to marry the blacksmith next door, and life was simple but happy.
James came. Not for me, but to investigate a corruption case related to water management. I breathed a sigh of relief but still reduced my outings. A few days passed without incident. One day, just as I opened the door to go out, I was struck hard on the back of my neck and lost consciousness. When I opened my eyes again, Emily was smiling at me, pouring water over my head.
My whole body was trembling, not just because of the cold water, but also because of Emily's expression. In the past, even when she played tricks, she always had a bright and flamboyant demeanor. But now, she looked incredibly vicious. 3 years had passed, and it seemed she had aged 10 years. Seeing me staring at her, she slapped me across the face, causing my head to spin.
Emily, have you lost your mind?
She threw away the wooden ladle and grabbed my chin.
I've been driven mad by all of you.
What does this have to do with me? I left you all a long time ago.
Do you think James requested to investigate the corruption in water management just to come to Suzhou to see you?
Who said he came to find me? I haven't even seen him. But she seemed mentally unstable, and no matter how I explained, it was useless. She took out a jade pendant. It was the birthday gift I had personally carved for James. However, ever since he married Emily, I hadn't seen him wear it.
After you were gone, James often stared at this pendant in a daze and spent nights at the courtyard where you used to live. Can you still say he doesn't care about you?
The 2 bodies I found didn't match my height. How could he not realize I faked my death? Don't try to deceive me.
Those 2 female bodies were just to fool the guards, making them think I was dead so they wouldn't search the area, allowing Daisy and me to escape. These tricks couldn't fool him. Hearing my words, Emily released my chin and laughed hysterically, tears streaming from her eyes.
Then you don't know that I had already prepared the bodies of you and your maid. After you escaped, I switched the bodies. If James had never discovered the truth and wallowed in despair, I would have let you go. But he found out and came to Suzhou to find you, so don't blame me for being ruthless.
My heart trembled. She had prepared the bodies long ago, which meant that if I hadn't faked my death and escaped, I would have been gone by her soon.
Do you love James so much that you have to harm me?
Wrong! I don't love him, I hate him.
Her veins bulged with anger, and her grip on my chin felt like it would break it. A dart struck her hand.
Emily, let her go.
I turned my head to see James standing at the door, seething with anger. Emily hid behind me, drawing a dagger and placing it against my neck. Once again, I became a hostage, just like 3 years ago when the Crown Prince kidnapped me. A bold guess surged in my mind.
Could it be? You've always liked the Crown Prince, and you resent James for what he did to him, don't you?
The body behind me stiffened for a moment, and laughter spread by my ear.
Yes, you're very clever. Even James didn't discover this. He killed my beloved, so I will take you away from him.
So Emily targeted me to get revenge on James. I couldn't help but feel a bit of sympathy for James. The person he cherished had been hating him all along.
Emily, listen to me,
Stop right there! Emily shouted, pressing the dagger closer to my neck. James suddenly halted, his figure lonely and sorrowful.
Emily, you've misunderstood. James has liked you for over 10 years. He even has your portrait hidden in his study, and he used to secretly watch you at the temple fair.
Shut up! The dagger pierced my neck slightly, and I could feel her impatience.
Emily, the crown prince was not a good person. He had been planning to harm you. His marriage proposal was just to win over your family's support. If it weren't for Sophia, he would have hurt you back then. Please, put the dagger down.
Yes, I'm just a stand-in. Let me go.
Emily wouldn't listen to anything, crying and shaking her head.
I don't believe you. You're lying. The crown prince promised to make me the happiest princess in the world. You're lying. I will take her away in front of you.
No!
No!
Warmth and the smell of blood spread across my neck, but it wasn't mine. I slowly turned my head to see an arrow had shot through Emily's shoulder from the back window. She staggered back in pain, and I quickly retreated. My legs gave way, and I fell into a familiar embrace. The scent of green tea was as comforting as ever.
Thank goodness you're all right. The arms around my waist tightened, and behind me, his heartbeat was rapid. His concern was genuine.
If only he had come to save me last time.
I was overthinking again.
Thank you for your concern, Your Grace. I'm fine now. You should go check on Victoria.
He didn't move.
Victoria has always said she wanted to hurt me, but after all, I'm still here. She needs you now. Go to her.
I don't know what nerve I touched, but he deflated instantly, losing all his energy. I carefully recalled, and it seemed like he had once said something similar to me. Sophia, you're still alive. Don't hold a grudge against Victoria.
I really didn't mean to blame him. But it was clear that I had struck a nerve. Let's talk tomorrow.
Daisy looked at Sophia with a complex expression. Sophia told her not to speak because she knew Daisy would say that James still had feelings for her, even though she had vaguely guessed it herself. In the private room of the theater, Sophia seriously looked at James for the first time since they met again. He had become more somber and reserved compared to 3 years ago. Noticing that he was also looking at her, she felt a bit uneasy and was about to look away when he spoke.
I wronged you before, did many things that hurt you. That was because I didn't understand my own heart. Now I know I can't live without you. Will you come back to the mansion with me?
I accept your apology, but I can't go back with you.
He wasn't surprised, as if he already knew her answer.
Can you give me a reason? I can change.
If someone had told her 3 years ago that James would apologize and change himself because he loved her, she wouldn't have believed it. But it happened after she no longer loved him. No, she realized she loved herself more.
There's no reason. The person you like isn't the real me, but the obedient and compliant Sophia. That was a facade I put on to stay by your side, afraid of saying the wrong thing and upsetting you, afraid of making mistakes and causing you trouble. I couldn't ask or dare to ask about your matters. You just feel uncomfortable because you suddenly lost a pet. If you truly liked me, you wouldn't have believed Emily's words without listening to my explanation. I don't blame you for using me as bait. After all, I sought you out first to escape the brothel. You've treated me well over the years, so I don't hate you. You don't need to feel guilty. Let's leave it at that, okay?
She denied his feelings, but she knew she was wrong. If she were just a pet, he wouldn't have been so persistent for 3 years. She did it to make him let go of her completely. They stared at each other across the table, her reflection in his pupils. He understood her thoughts, and she understood his. She wanted freedom and respect, which he couldn't give. He wanted her to be obedient and compliant, which she couldn't do. His clenched hand opened and closed, finally uttering one word.
Okay.
As she walked out of the private room, Daisy immediately approached, clutching her skirt and hesitating to speak. Sophia smiled and led her downstairs.
Daisy, do you want to go with me or stay with your big brother James?
This.
Seeing her hesitate, Sophia pretended to be sad.
I stayed here for you, but you only have your big brother James in your heart.
I'm not.
All right, I'm just teasing you. I still need to prepare your dowry and make sure you have a grand wedding.